The following video is by the Dark Conservatarian. If you like it, be sure to subscribe to his channel, link in the description. And a reminder that every patron who donates at the Super VIP Club level or higher is entitled to have one video mirrored on my channel per month, no questions asked. So if you're interested, head over to my Subscribestar, Bitbacker, or Patreon pages. Without further ado, here's the Dark Conservatarian.
Any human right, any value to our lives, can be taken and used by a capitalist to accumulate more profit.
That totally depends on what you consider to be rights and what you think people have a right to, Owen. So, I decided to unfortunately put myself through the painstaking task of making a response video
to our least favorite lying, smearing, baby back Owen Donald.
So a while back on Twitter, I had actually seen Owen talk about the commodification of rights. I responded to him, then he responded to me, and then we got in a big Twitter scuffle, same old But then soon afterwards he decided to make a video talking about this issue right here. And seeing as how I kind of suspect that this video was made in conjunction with our spat that we had over Twitter, and above all else, I also see this talking point time and time again brought up by far leftists when it comes to the issue of capitalism and economics and why supposedly capitalism is so immoral. So because of all that, despite this video's age, I thought it was very relevant to respond to. So without further ado, let's get into this and school some commie ass.
Capitalism is the accumulation of capital to accumulate profit and power.
Socialism is the violent and/or tyrannical seizing of people's property and wealth and power.
Any human right, any value to our lives, can be taken and used by a capitalist to accumulate more profit. This is why opposition to capitalism has to come from all angles. There is little point saying you oppose the free market in some sectors, but still maintain your support of a system that ultimately has no limit and can commodify anything you wish to preserve.
Nothing but preaching to the choir to some of his followers who already agree with some of his basic assertions. So moving on.
In the UK, we have the NHS, which guarantees healthcare to all. However, because of conservative defunding, the NHS is under severe stress. We are seeing people unable to attend meetings with their GP. We're seeing hospitals have ridiculously long and unnecessary wait times, which can lead to many people waiting around for hours for things they really ought to be having seen immediately. We're seeing hospitals lose staff because they don't have the funds to pay them.
Honestly, I look at that and I see that as a piece of evidence of one of the big flaws of nationalization of an industry. The control and power being so centralized that there is high potential for massive abuse of that power.
The people who wish to make more profit are winning because as the service is defunded, more and more private contracts are being handed to corporations.
And what's so wrong with that again?
Thus allowing them to make profit are our human rights.
Oh, that's right. Thank you for reminding me, Owen. Yeah, no, you don't have a right to somebody else's services. You have the right to try and pursue said services if you want to, but if they refuse to give you that service, well then they are not morally obligated to follow your leisure.
The situation is worse in countries where the healthcare was never nationalized to begin with. In America, people have multi-thousand-pound dollar bills to pay for things they really should be guaranteed as human beings.
Guaranteed, eh? Are we going to force at gunpoint people to give them these guaranteed services? Because ultimately that is what your beliefs entail, Owen, is if you are saying that somebody should be guaranteed a service, well then ultimately somebody is going to be forced by the government or by mob rule to give that service.
People unable to even get to the hospital because just getting the ambulance costs too much for them.
Wait, what? Did I hear him correctly there?
People unable to even get to the hospital because just getting the ambulance costs too much for them.
Yeah, no, in my Google search, I'm finding no stats nor even any anecdotes of ambulances refusing to give ambulance rides to plausible patients because they couldn't pay for it or anything like that. I'm finding plenty enough anecdotes of people refusing to take the ambulance services But the ambulances refusing to give those services to anyone because of cost, I'm not finding it. So give me an example, an anecdote, or even better, give me a stat on your claim there. Otherwise, I'm going to just say that you're full of Owen.
And this is on top of other things that are commodified, like rent, like food, like electricity.
None of those things people have a right to either, otherwise you are going to have to force people to give those services and goods to other people.
The way we view our society should not be one of pricing out people from the things they need to survive, but of looking after people, of maintaining people's human rights.
Sure, let's preserve people's right to life by punishing and preventing those who commit murder, and preserve people's private property rights by punishing and preventing those who commit theft and burglary.
And to do this, we must deconstruct the system that allows the powerful and the wealthy to consume the majority of the resources, to price out people from what they need to survive.
If person A has a claim to a berry bush, let's say for example, are we going to steal from person A to give to person B who is hungry and in need of food? Cause if so, then I find that to be immoral, honestly. I mean, as as it is that person A would let person B starve, it is not because of person A's actions as to why person B is starving. It is a lack of action, if anything else, as to why that person B is starving. Lack of action on really anyone's part, not just person A. Despite that, though, I believe that people have an inherent natural right to their own private property, in which the berry bush is person A's private property, and to just take that from him, that would be a violation of his rights. And violating a person's rights in that kind of manner is immoral to me, and millions upon millions of other people as well, if not billions.
To allow people to have their human rights is a guarantee, not be requiring to sell their labour to someone just to obtain basic human rights and basic survival.
You're gonna have to make the substantive argument as to break down as to how that is so wrong, to try to convince people of your worldview. Otherwise, you're just preaching to the choir, dude.
And to do this, we must break down the system that allows commodification of these things.
Okay, slow down, you charlatan. You keep on using that word as a buzzword and keep on putting a negative connotation to the word commodify. And I just want to look up the definition to see if there's anything negative that I can find in it as well. Commodify. To turn something such as an intrinsic value or a work of art into a commodity. Look up definition of commodity. Definition of commodity: an economic good such as a product of agriculture or mining, an article of commerce especially when delivered for shipment, a mass-produced unspecialized product, something useful or valued, convenience, advantage, a good or service whose wide availability typically leads to smaller profit margins and diminishes the importance of factors such as brand name other than price, one that is subject to ready exchange or exploitation within a market. So none of these I really see anything inherently immoral with to turn something into a commodity or to commodify, in other words. And while at it, let's look at another buzzword that you keep on wanting to use, Owen. Exploit. Exploitation. So to exploit, to make productive use of or utilize. To make use of meanly or unfairly for one's own advantage. Now as far as the second definition goes, meanly or unfairly, of what is viewed fair or unfair, that is so subjective that the second definition right there is practically useless. But going off of the first definition right there, I see nothing immoral with to be making productive use of something or of someone's work and so forth.
It is ultimately something which has to go beyond the call of just reforming capitalism. We can't reform a system that ultimately is based around the commodification of life.
What commodification of life? The only way that I can see us literally commodifying life is through slavery. Now show me any example of us in the Western world holding people by force at gunpoint or by the chain to work or be owned by XYZ person.
Like we are seeing in the UK, where the NHS is crumbling because of capitalist funding and privatisation.
Citation needed.
According to King's Fund and Spectator, there are some disputations on whether or not the NHS is really being privatized, Owen. So, as far as your claim of privatization of the NHS goes, I am going to repeat, like the Teal Deer meme says, citation needed. please.
In America, where millions of people are needlessly restricted from basic human rights, basic healthcare, because they can't afford it.
Again, nobody has a right to a grocery store owner's food, otherwise you are going to have to be literally stealing from that grocery store owner.
Meanwhile, so much wealth exists in the power of the wealthy.
Don't care.
So much could be done to help these people, and it isn't being done, and that is a disgrace.
Your ideology and rhetoric is a disgrace.
Yes, I'm all for and think more private charity should happen, even if a lot of it already does happen. And I'm even open to the compromise of basic welfare like food stamps and perhaps basic Medicare existing only for the poorest among us though.
But I am in no ways for forcefully obligating people to give their own goods or services to other people because some moral socialist twit on Twitter says that they have a right to those goods or services.
Which, isn't helping people, is actively restricting people from their rights because of the need to make profit.
I agree. In a lot of ways, in our rather restrictive, modern-day semi-capitalist societies, our rights are being restricted. Like how the minimum wage laws restrict how much an employer can pay their employees, price controls that restrict how much business owners are allowed to charge for their products, trade tariffs that punish people for doing business overseas, drug laws that restrict people from selling weed, and of course many more. But these are all because of government, not capitalism. No, in all seriousness, he's referring to capitalism as the supposed restrictor of human rights, which that isn't the case. As I've said on Twitter to Owen before, and I'm saying right now to all of you, you have an inherent natural right to try and obtain a good or service, but you don't have an inherent natural right to someone else's good or service if they don't want to give that good or service to you, especially if you aren't willing and able to give something that they want to them in return. This is the natural right and principle that capitalism is basically designed to recognize. So when Owen, Donald, or any other socialist says that people have a right to food, clothing, housing, education, and healthcare, or anything else, basically what they're saying, and I don't think I'm strawmanning when I say this, is that they have a right to somebody else's good or service, which that is logically going to require an application of force upon the person who has that good or service, either by government or by mob rule. I don't care which of them two methods you want to take. Either way is an application of force and a violation of people's rights, and thus I, and among a number of other people, find immoral. And if this is something that you actually do not believe when you say people have a right to food when they're unable to buy it from a grocery store, for example, then I highly advise you to reword your rhetoric, because this is what you're logically implying and advocating for when you say people have a right to a good or service. I'm gonna just end the video here because the rest of this video is the same repetitive choir preaching he's said plenty in his video already. If you like this video, then by all means hit the like button. Want to see more content like this? Hit subscribe and click the bell button to be notified of future response videos and other content from my main channel. Also check out my secondary channel, Dark Hunt Entertainment, where I post movie reviews, gaming snippets, and gaming live streams. I'll see you all in the next video, and God bless.